With the spooky time season right here, I decided to go ahead and revisit some older films I haven't had the opportunity to really talk about on the channel, and I'll start off with 3 disturbing films I've watched and that totally rocked me and changed me and made me view film in a different manner. Now, this isn't an iceberg trying to go deeper and deeper into more disturbing films. I don't really like films that are shocking for shock's sake, not trying to criticize anybody who does, but that's just not for me. These are films that I still enjoy the craft of them, as well as what they did and the sort of movements they were part of them, some of them. And that's pretty much how this list is compiled. These are 3, and I'll probably do maybe 3 or 4 parts for it because I do have about 10 films that I want to talk about. But for the sake of making this a little bit more digestible and not really going deeper and deeper into some very dark themes in these movies, I'll do 3 at a time. And I'll start off with my, I guess you could say, 3 top films I think that would sort of fit into this genre of disturbing films. So let's get into it. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. If you like these videos, I'll be doing more. If you want, I probably will be going more in depth into these movies in a separate video for each of them, like a review or sort of like talking about them openly with spoilers. So that video will probably come up if this video does well. So we'll see what happens. So the first film on my list is going to be Michael Haneke's film Funny Games, which I actually watched a while ago back in high school. And this was during the times when, you know, you just want to watch some of the most disturbing horror films out there, and you would go on the internet and look for top lists and things like that. Back then we had those icebergs and everything still, and this was like a decade or so ago. Now, Michael Haneke's film Funny Games has always been on those lists ever since it premiered at Cannes in 1997, where it caused a wide divide between people, and so many people were calling out the depiction of torture and violence and just saying it was too sadistic to showcase. Michael Haneke has gone on record to say he was purposely making a film that would make you uncomfortable with the violence on screen, just to see how people would react to violence on screen, feeling that so many of us have become desensitized back in the 90s to it. And to further his point, he decided to do a shot-for-shot remake 10 years later with Tim Roth as well as Naomi Watts, and also Brady Covert, the director of The Brutalist, is in that movie. Basically, this follows 2 young men who go out to torture a family, make them play sadistic games with each other, and the film just descends into depravity and some very, very sadistic violence that goes on. This movie really does traumatize you in a way that I think is interesting. The movie also has a lot of breaking the fourth wall, because the main character does speak to the audience, almost like telling you hey, you're a viewer of all this, seeing this poor family get completely tortured, all of this, and you're hoping for a payoff, but will we give you that payoff? And I think it's the way that the film plays with the audience, and also as just a piece of art in itself, where it's really more along the lines of, you came to watch a movie where you knew a family was going to be tortured, and then you pretty much are waiting for a payoff. But does that come for you? And was that really necessary for you to watch a family get tortured just to see a payoff at the end? So it kind of makes you question these things about how we sort of take in entertainment, and what exactly are we watching, or why are we watching something when we know it's horrific and all of that. Which, of course, for Michael Haneke, that's something that he can ask to the audience. For you as an audience member, do you think those questions need to be asked or not? So it's really a movie that really gets you thinking at the end. And you know, some people completely hate this movie and think that Michael Haneke is just trying to make a point that doesn't make sense, and that's totally fine as well. But I still think watching it at a young age, it really was a film that I was really captivated by. I think that the performances were interesting. Up until this point, a lot of decisions that go into this movie really had me baffled, something I hadn't seen before. And I think it really opened my eyes up more to Michael Haneke's other work, and also other European directors, which I think are way better than Funny Games for sure. But still, Funny Games was sort of that gateway into those filmmakers and Michael Haneke's rest of his filmography. Like I said, he did do a shot-by-shot remake of this, so if you want to watch it, you can watch the original, or you can watch the English version with Naomi Watts. Fair warning, like I said, with all of these movies here, they are very graphic. They do go into some very dark and sadistic things. I wouldn't recommend them just to go watch either, like to somebody who's asking me for a good film to watch. These are just films that definitely fit into the disturbing category, and I definitely haven't watched these films maybe more than twice, because just how dark and twisted they really are. It's just not something good for your mental. So that's why I think Funny Games is so disturbing, in the sense that you're watching this violence ensue and you came to watch a movie which you sort of had a clue of what it was about, right? We all go to see horror movies. We know what's going to happen in these horror movies, but why do we decide to put ourselves in this situation? I think is what Michael Haneke is getting at here. And the way we see this movie, Funny Games, unfold, and ultimately when we think we should be rooting, is when things sort of take a turn as well, and then it causes you to sit there in your own discomfort because it was sort of a red herring. A lot of things that happen in this movie, of course, also subvert your expectations, because it sort of teases you with these ideas that should happen, and when they don't happen, it's sort of your reaction that you need to think about, of why did I think that was going to happen and then it didn't happen. I think it makes it more disturbing that it sort of doesn't feel like a movie in itself. It's more of trying to just discomfort you as much as possible, and I think that's what Michael Haneke is getting here at the end. That's just my warning to you, but yeah, Michael Haneke has an extensive filmography with some more incredible films as well, which I do want to watch a couple of them as well that I haven't, so stay tuned for that. Next film on my list is going to be Audition, which came out in 1999. This is a Japanese film from Takashi Mike, who doesn't shy away from disturbing films. He has some other disturbing films as well, which I probably will talk about. This film, however, I think is one of those movies that really sort of pushed Japanese cinema forward in a way and sort of brought it to more of an international stage. Of course, before this, we had seen other films like Ringu and all of that do the same for Japanese horror, but I think Audition became one of those sort of rallying cries that American filmmakers and others would talk about when they said Japanese horror is on another level, because Audition is a slow burn of a movie that definitely takes it to a whole other level with that final and third act. Basically, you follow a man who wants to find a girlfriend, so he enlists a producer friend to hold some fake auditions in which they will find him a new girlfriend. And through these auditions, along comes Asami, a young woman who pretty much just meets everything he wants from a woman, all of his standards checked, and he starts this relationship, but slowly and surely we see that there's something more within Asami that we didn't see in that initial audition, and things start to take a dark turn. This movie goes in some interesting directions, and it does go into some very hard to stomach sort of themes and ideas as well, especially with abuse and the cycle of that. And I think it's such an interesting take on how abuse can mold people into maybe versions of themselves they never thought they would become. And it is just a very hard movie to stomach. I watched it initially, I think, in high school, maybe as a senior, and I didn't watch it again until maybe 5 or 6 years after, or maybe a bit more, just because it is such a very hard movie to take in. And I think once you watch it, a lot of it becomes ingrained in your brain, so you don't really have to watch it because it's already traumatized you with what happens. This is a movie that has a lot of themes that involve sexual violence and all of that, which I think really add more to that final act and almost make it such a tragic and horrible ending as well. And I do want to talk more about it, but I don't want to give spoilers away if anybody wants to watch it. Like I said, it is a very hard movie to stomach. It's also a slow burn, so it does take its time to build up until that final act, which is what a lot of people talk about, but it does really build that foundation. So once you're up until that final attack and you're watching it all unfold, you don't just feel the horror of what's happening, or you don't just feel squirmish or trying to look away because of it. You also feel this very dark and very hard knot in your stomach, because it is just such a despicable thing that happens, but you understand why the despicable things are happening. It's kind of weird to explain, but it just is a movie that really has you there just watching just horrors unfold, and you see the horrors before that caused the horrors now, so it's a cycle of abuse, a cycle of violence, maybe, if you will. It's just a very hard-hitting Japanese movie, and this film has been called both a feminist and a misogynistic type of horror film, which I think is interesting. You get those different varying degrees for this movie, and a lot of people hate it and love it, and that's when you have something interesting, when there is no conclusive or just all around celebratory experience for a film, or everybody despising it. It makes people talk, and that's what you want a film to do, is make you talk. Audition, of course, has many scenes that are definitely some of the most disturbing things I think that have been put onto film, but I think in particular the story behind Asami has to be some of the darkest material I've seen be presented. The story of Asami is so despicable of what happens to her, as well as the horrors that she has to endure, ultimately to see her become a sort of vengeful spirit, an avenging angel is what I've seen some people call her as well. It is still not enough to really sort of give you any satisfaction about where her story ultimately went. And I think that's what adds more to this film, is that this movie really cuts deep, which is how horrific the life of Asami, and that's really what makes it so disturbing to me. It's not really these moments in the third act in which Asami gets quote-unquote retribution. It is more of this like sense of what her past holds and just what that made her become, and what does the future even hold for people like Asami as well. And I think that's what makes the film much more darker in my opinion, and it still sits and it still eats away at me after watching it so many years ago, and I might be due for a rewatch. We'll see. The final film I want to talk about is going to be Martyrs. This is a movie I've watched once, and once is enough. This is a film directed by Pascal Laugier, and this is a French film that has been connected to the new French extremity type of horror, which we saw with other films at the time, like High Tension. This movie came out in 2008, and you basically follow two women out to get revenge on those that pretty much abuse them. And that's all I'll say about this movie. This movie is a movie that takes things to the extreme. If you think some movies are extreme that come out today, think of it as a little bit more of another step above. This movie, when I first heard about it when I was in high school, these are all three movies I watched in high school because they were all like those type of challenge movies you watch. Like if you thought maybe, people would say, oh, you think that the new Saw movie is like crazy and graphic and stuff like that. You haven't seen nothing yet. That's the type of vibe back in high school, right? And this was a movie that I would always hear people talk about, and people on forums, and people would talk about it at school and all of that. And I finally said, all right, let's watch this film. So this actually caused a walkout when it was initially screened at a film festival. It was deemed very much so too graphic to showcase at some cinemas. So I'll probably spoil a bit of it here, and if you don't want that spoil, you can definitely skip right here to get to the ending of this video. But basically you have this secret group that wants to torture people pretty much to the brink of death, and in order to do that, they go through very, very extreme torture methods, which get very graphic. The camera doesn't shy away from it. You see it all unfold, and it is some of the most hard to stomach things. Even 17 years after its release, it still is some of the most graphic things you'll see in a film. And these people are doing this because they want to see if there is an afterlife or not. So they'll pretty much torture these people relentlessly up until they're about to die, because they feel like this is what sort of gets them closer to God, a sainthood, a martyr of sorts. And they want to know, is there an afterlife or not? They ask these people these questions right after the torture. Pretty much it is a very nihilistic film in the way that it sort of handles the depiction of violence towards individuals. It is so hard to stomach. And I only watched it once because of that reason. It's just a movie that's kind of hard to watch when you see these people just suffering and suffering for about a 2-hour runtime. I think that this movie definitely did push the French extremity movement forward. And of course, you have all of these movies that try to push the boundaries forward. Martyrs is a movie that takes that violence, and there's not a sort of like gag at the end or something so ridiculous and absurd. It feels so incredibly real, and I think that's what makes all three of these movies that much more harder, is when this violence is occurring, it feels so real, like it's just happening and there's nothing you can do about it. So yeah, truly some very disturbing things in this movie. Really do not recommend this movie as a watch at all to people. I think that this is one of those movies that truly is upsetting in the way that it depicts its violence, and it is one of those movies that I just don't think I'll ever watch again. It is a one and done it for me. And another movie like that is actually Requiem for a Dream, which I'm going to talk about in my other video. So stay tuned for that one, probably at the end of this week. I have seen many people talk about Martyrs and sort of say that doesn't have any meaning, and it sort of falls into the quote unquote torture porn of that era, which of course many people contribute to Saw, as well as the rise of Hostel at the moment. But I think that there is something that definitely goes beyond here with what it's trying to go with its messaging and with its themes, especially with the more nihilistic and also the more religious themes that it has as well. I think it adds to the layer of how much people put others through because of their religion, right? And that's a whole video I can do on martyrs as well. I do want to make a whole video about that. I don't want to go too deep into it because I think the film does encompass what people will put other people through just because of their religion, and it sort of adds more weight to it. But let me know what you think about these three movies, if you've watched them or not. Like I said, I don't really recommend watching them like that. I just wanted to go back into some of the movies I've watched in the past that truly shook me to my core, and these three are some of those. And I just wanted to choose these three and put them together because these were movies I watched during high school, and they were some of the very first early, you could say, quote unquote, disturbing movies that I watched that truly just completely rattled me. But I still think that they do have some artistic merit to them, and also I think the controversies and everything they caused in their subsequent release made sure that we saw that things weren't going to be suppressed when it comes to movies. And that's a whole other conversation about what should or shouldn't be in a film, and should films be banned and all, which goes back to the old days of the video nasties, which were a whole thing in the UK. And that's a whole other topic. I'm going on so many tangents right now. I'm not going to be able to finish the video if I keep doing so. But if y'all want me to talk more about these things, let me know in the comments down below. I love talking about horror, even when it comes to the disturbing material that some of it produces. So make sure you follow me for all things you love. Hit the subscribe and notification bell. We are on the road to 50,000 subscribers. Let's get to it. As always, that is going to do it for me. I'll see all of you next time. Stay safe.